So you're trying to decide whether a glass f2.8 aperture is good enough for you, or if it's not as fast as you need it to, you're in the right place. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thomas Love here from One Lens Only, and today I put to the test my Sony a7C Mark II. It was a gloomy day, so I went out during raining season because I wanted to see whether an f2.8 glass is enough for streets when you don't have direct sunshine, meaning there is less light to get into the camera and hit the sensor. I know there are f2.8 zoom glasses like 24-70 from Sigma, from Sony, from Tamron, from many brands that are good enough. It's a good all-around glass, it's a good compromise, but is it good enough? So I wanted to try it out, and I went downtown and I used max aperture f2.8. I can go faster with this glass. I can open up to f1.8, but I didn't do so because I wanted to see how the camera reacts. So they told us that with nowadays camera, with BSI sensors, we can rely on higher ISO values without introducing too much noise, too many grains into the picture. So I went to test it and I used f2.8 as a max aperture. I started slower with f3.2, which was already way wider than I would use for street photography. I would use at least f5.6, f8, f11 maybe for streets, because you want to have a broad depth of field, you want to see your hero and also the surroundings in focus, while if you don't have enough light, of course you cannot create it, you're not in studio, you cannot manage as it pleases you, but you can only go faster or go wider with the f aperture. And so I set the f aperture initially to 3.2 and then 2.8. The shutter speed was a standard. I went for 1/640th of a second because I still wanted to see the drops falling in my shots. You see, I had some luck, so I was able to portray that, but I let the camera manage the ISO. So we'll see together with magnification 100 to 100% how much grains we introduce in a camera which is recent enough, which is a BSI sensor, not stacked, and with a fast glass. So if you're ready, let's go rolling. So let's start with the very first. Here, as you can see, I was using f3.2 and the camera suggested I went up to 2500 ISO. It looks like a decent peak, but if you go in, now I don't know what percentage of magnification this is, but you can see the subject is not clean. You have grains in the photo. And so you can say more or less the same things for other pictures. This one was 6400 ISO. As you can see, it looks clean from a distance, but if you zoom in, this was my subject. See, you have so many grains, and even in the darker areas, this is hardly usable. So this camera is not pleasing me in that dimension. Now let's try to find a photo when I didn't have such a high ISO value. Oh, this is a good one. I remember it. This is a 6400 ISO, but the scene was lit enough. As you can see, you have these yellow nuances, but it's not lack of light. It's really the color of this neon light. And then it looks clean enough, as you can see from the TV where you have backlight, but the darker areas you see that much grain anyway. So 6400 is a no-go to me. This one was a bit faster, was 2500, but still, if you go in the darker areas, this is hardly usable. I mean, maybe you can print it out, but the moment you start, I'm not a pixel peeper, of course, but I like image quality, so I'm in for the image quality. I remember this one was a bit faster, so this is 2000 ISO, and as you can see, here we start reasoning. This is clean enough to me, right? So at least the main subject, which is closer, it was clean enough, and then of course the background is blurred, and then you have some grains in the darker areas, but 2000 ISO, I think we can manage. This is a pleasing result. Now let me see, this one, this is 800 ISO, right? So as you can see, I was able to have the drops in my frame. This is not grain, guys. These are the raindrops falling because it's a rainy day. And as you can see, with 800 ISO, even in the darker areas, this is good enough. So what does it mean? It means that you need a faster glass when you have such challenging conditions. Here, as you can see, I was using the f2.8 because I didn't want to overcome that. I wanted to test and see if an f2.8 zoom would be good enough. This is just a crop of the same photo I've taken and I've showed you before. So this is good enough. 800 ISO, but if I had a faster aperture like f1.8, of course I would have different results. So here, this is good enough. It started being grainy, and this was at 800 ISO, but there was plenty of light, as you can see, everywhere, even in the dark areas. This is clean enough. Now, I don't exaggerate with the magnification because it's only 33 megapixel. I don't have 45 nor 60. And here it's just to show you that even if you're using an f2.8 glass, this is not a good compromise for me for streets, because then you don't have depth of field. So I focused on this lady. That was my main subject because I wanted to show the pattern on the umbrella. But then in f2.8, her friend that was just one step further is not in focus anymore, because you have such a shallow depth of field that this person was not in focus, as you can see. So you win some, you lose some with f2.8 aperture. Of course, it can help you, it can save the day. Despite it was still daylight, it was a gloomy day, but it was still daylight. So guys, it's a matter of compromise. When you're out there, there is no recipe, there is no camera, there is no AI that can do the job for you. This was 1000 ISO f2.8 at 1/640th of a second. I think it's a good photo. I like the framing, I like the colors and the rendering, but as you can see, f2.8 didn't save the day because I needed more depth of field. And so with this camera, I knew that if I went for f5.6 in order to see the other person in focus, then I would have had too much grains, as I shown you with other photos. So this is another one that I want to show you. This is 2500 ISO, but still the subject was not lit enough to be clear. As you can see from the distance, it looks fine, it looks clean, but if you zoom in, you can see some pixels in the person. So even with 33 megapixel, I'm not able to crop in that much. See, this is the original framing. I can maybe go till here and still have a clean shot, or at least a clean enough shot. I wouldn't zoom any further because otherwise you see the grains in the darker areas. And so BSI sensor, Sony automatic ISO, maybe it's not saving the day. Guys, you need a fast lens, but if you go too fast, then of course you will not have the depth of field that you need. So how were the results? Do you think they were good enough? Do you think there was a threshold not to overcome? When I was using my Leica Q2, I set the ISO value max to 3200. Here, ideally they say you can go for 6400, but I would definitely not go to 12800 because it's way too much for me. And then in the very end, you can use the pics just online. I would never print them nor sell them to a client. And so let me know down here in the comments which ISO value are you relying on the most at the max. And with that, I hope you got some value out of this video. If you did, please remember to like it, share it on social media, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the new videos to come, and I guess I will see you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.